Hello, my name is Abebe, Ethiopian Hearts for Peace, EHP. I would like to emphasize that EHP should not only encounter false narratives, but also provide a historical and constitutionally grounded peace alternative. We have a few things that need correcting. So correcting false narratives that leads to a path to peace and unity in Ethiopia. As the number one false narrative we found is from the beginning of the constitutional development. They say the Amhara were historical oppressors of other ethnic groups. This is huge, huge. Now let's take a look at the historical and constitutional facts. Ethiopia was historically governed through a feudal system where land and power were controlled by regional rulers, regardless of ethnicity. Many regions, including Amhara, Oromo, Tigray, the southern nations, were ruled by their own elites, who often exploit their own people alongside others. The notion of an Amhara oppressor was politicized in the late 20th century to justify ethnic federalism and ethnic-based struggle for power. So the correction is, Ethiopia's history is complex, we know that, with the shared struggles and contributions from all ethnic groups. Okay, blaming one group collectively ignores the role of multiple ruling classes in different historical periods. So we suggest a peaceful narrative as an alternative here. Ethiopia's history is not a simple story of one group oppressing another. That's where the truth is. Rather, different ruling elites, regardless of ethnicity, govern based on feudal and imperial structures. True justice comes from addressing individual and systemic injustices, not blaming entire ethnic groups for historical grievance structures. It's not a denial, it is a fact. People, listen. That was a number one false narrative. A number two false narrative in Ethiopia is Ethiopia is a prison of nations and nationalities. For those people who split words, take a good look at this. Your skill might come into play. Ethiopia is a prison of nations and nationalities. Now let's look at this from historical and constitutional facts, not just splitting words. Ethiopia is one of the oldest states in the world. I can tell you more about it, but that's definitive. It's formed through cultural, religious, and economic interactions, marriages, and alliances between different groups, not just conquest. Unlike many African nations created through colonial borders, Ethiopia's unity was preserved through internal evolution and resistance against colonialism. We need to take pride on this. Adwa victory is no longer celebrated in Ethiopia. What a shame. The 1995 Ethiopian constitution, which enshrines ethnic federalism, fueled this narrative by emphasizing ethnicity over shared national identity. This is one of the most poisonous narrative ever inserted in Ethiopian people mind. So it needs to be corrected. Ethiopia has long been a land of multicultural coexistence, not an artificial prison. The current ethnic divisions were deepened. That's a great deal comparing Ethiopia's situation with former empires like the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Soviet Union, Russia, as well as failed states like Libya and Iraq can offer valuable lessons, you know. So we have a case study here, and we want to see lessons from history. So we need to avoid the fate of failed and fragmented states. Case study 1. The Soviet Union, USSR. For those who are young, this was a great nation. So we are going to take a look at the dangers of ethnic federalism. Let's take a look at the historical context first. The Soviet Union, USSR, was a multi-ethnic empire that implemented ethnic federalism similar to Ethiopia's current system. It established autonomous republics for major ethnic groups, giving them the constitutional right to secede, just like Ethiopia's Article 39. And instead of creating harmony, ethnic identity became politicized, and leaders used nationalism to consolidate power, leading to internal rivalries. So USSR is no longer here. How it collapsed? Remember the date, 1991. In 1991, as politically instability grew, several republics invoked their right to secede, leading to the rapid disintegration of the USSR. 1991. Who took power in 1991? TPLF. What did they do? They copied Article 39 from a failed state such as USSR. Now ethnic conflicts erupted in places like Chechnya, Georgia, and Ukraine as groups fought for territorial control. The collapse led to economic hardship, war, and mass displacement. Russia has struggled to build its influence ever since. So now, what's the lesson for Ethiopia? Ethiopia's ethnic federalism mirrors the Soviet model with similar risks of fragmentation and ethnic-based conflict. A citizen-based federal system, rather than an ethnic one, would promote national unity while still allowing regional governance. So the key takeaway here is ethnic federalism does not guarantee harmony. It often leads to disintegration. Ethiopia must learn from the Soviet Union's failure and build a governance system that prioritizes unity over ethnic fragmentation. Case study number 2, Yugoslavia. When ethnic nationalism destroys a country, Yugoslavia comes second to USSR. What is the historical context? Yugoslavia was a diverse state, home to Serbs, Croats, Bosnians, Slovaks, and other ethnic groups. Like Ethiopia, it had a multi-ethnic history with cultural blending, but suffered from deep-seated ethnic divisions. So how it collapsed? After the fall of its strong central leader, Joseph Tito, ethnic elites promoted nationalist rhetoric, blaming others for past oppression. The country descended into war in the 1990s. Remember, 1991, USSR, 1990s, Soviet Union. with horrific ethnic cleansing campaigns, including the Bosnian genocide. The result, a once strong state was reduced to multiple warring nations, each weaker and more vulnerable than before. So, lesson for Ethiopia. You listen. If Ethiopia continues down the path of ethnic-based governance and historical grievances, it risks Yugoslavia's fate. Only a governance system based on equal citizenship and national unity can prevent civil war and disintegration. So, the key takeaway here, Ethiopia must reject ethnic extremism and embrace unity. History shows that no country survives long when ethnic identity becomes more important than shared nationhood. So we saw two case studies. Both USSR and Yugoslavia disintegrated in 1990s. Now let's take a look at case study number 3. Let's take a look at Libya. The danger of power vacuum and external meddling. What is the history behind it? Libya was ruled by Muammar Gaddafi for decades, maintaining control through strong centralized governance, but little institutional development. After the 2011 NATO intervention and Gaddafi's cessation, Libya succeeded into chaos, civil war, and militia rule. How it became a failed state? Ethnic and tribal divisions resurfaced and rival factions fought for control. Foreign powers exploited the instability, with Turkey, Russia, the UAE, and others backing different armed groups. Guess who there is also? Egypt. So Libya today has no functional government. You only know Somalia, right? You add to your list Libya. So technocratic leadership has often played a crucial role in stabilizing and developing nations, whether explicitly called technocracy or simply a government led by professionals instead of politicians who rise through rhetoric, identity, politics, or military power. Technocratic governance prioritizes competence, expertise, and long-term planning for national prosperity. What is technocratic leadership, you may ask? A technocratic government is one where experts and professionals, including engineers, economists, scientists, etc., lead the country, making decisions based on data, efficiency, national interest, rather than ideology or ethnic identity. Why does Ethiopia need it? Escaping ethnic politics is not a simple task. Ethiopia's governance has been trapped in ethnic rivalries. Rather than national development, technocratic leadership prioritizes capability over ethnicity. And it also helps in economic recovery. Many successful countries were built by technocratic leaders who implemented long-term infrastructure and industrial plans. National unity. A government run by professionals focus on solutions, not blame, creating a common Ethiopian identity instead of ethnic fragmentation. So let's take a look at a technocratic leadership case studies we found. Number 1 in our list is Singapore. From a poor nation to a global economic power, Technocratic leader Lee Kuan Yew, Prime Minister, 1959 to 1990. When Singapore gained independence in 1965, it was a poor, ethnically divided, and resource-scarce island. Lee Kuan Yew assembled a cabinet of engineers, economists, and technocrats instead of career politicians. Policies were driven by efficiency, meritocracy, and economic growth, not identity politics. Where Ethiopia made a mistake is in the 1960s, students' appraisal. Students are students, not well educated, but today they are too old even to speak to us. Those are the leaders who put ethnic identity to galvanize support. The result? Singapore is now one of the richest and most developed nations in the world. So what is the key lessons for Ethiopia? National unity over ethnic politics. Policies must serve all citizens, not specific ethnic groups. Leadership must be given to the most competent, not the most popular. Focus must be on infrastructure, education, and industry instead of ideological debates. And number 2 is China. Engineers and scientists are the one driving the development. The technocratic leadership, Deng Xiaoping, and post-1978 China. After Mao's ideological rule, China shifted a government dominated by engineers and scientists. 90% of Chinese top leaders between 1980 and 2000 were trained engineers. 90%. Policies were focused on economic modernization, industrialization, and infrastructure rather than ideological struggles. Today, China is the world's second largest economy, proving that expert-led governance is effective. What is the lesson for Ethiopia now? Where were you? Where were we? I'm sorry. I apologize for that phone call interruption. I'm back again. My name is Bebe Nagash. I have been discussing with case studies. Now let me get back to it. This time with similar, focus on. But on a post-fragmentation of conflicts and how nations suffered due to unresolved issues. Now, why fragmentation fails? I wish it was an easy separation for Ethiopia. I wish that was that easy. Forcing people to be united and be one is not going to work. Centralized power tried, it didn't work. Decentralized power didn't work. Now we are here. For those of you who think secession is the only option and you want to secede, using Article 39 of the Constitution, I can tell you why fragmentation fails often. Why Ethiopia's fragmentation is no good, doesn't bring any peace. This is to show the case for dialogue and historical accuracy. Okay, 1. the myth of peace through fragmentation. This myth, many ethnic regional groups believe that breaking away from a larger state will bring peace and self-determination. However, historical and modern case studies reveal that fragmentation often deepens conflicts, leads to economic collapse, and fuels new internal divisions within the newly formed entities. Ethiopia faces similar risks. Ethnic federalism has already created segregation, displacement, and violence. Yet, further division will not solve historical grievances or resource struggles. 2. We have global case studies of failed fragmentation for you. We discussed earlier how they got fragmented, so let's begin with Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia, a legacy of endless wars, they call it. Once a unified country, Yugoslavia fragmented into 7 independent nations in the 1990s, sparking some of the bloodiest ethnic wars in Europe since World War II. Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia suffered mass killings, ethnic cleansing, and genocide due to unresolved grievances, disputed borders, and historical hatred. More than 130,000 people died, and decades later, ethnic tensions still persist in the Balkans. That's A. Let's be next to Ethiopia, Sudan, and South Sudan. A new country, same conflicts. South Sudan seceded from Sudan in 2011, hoping for peace. However, just 2 years later, it descended into civil war, with ethnic groups fighting over political power and resources like oil. Over 400,000 people died and millions were displaced. The new country remains unstable because its internal issues were never addressed before separation. C. Now let's take a look at Ethiopia itself, from far, near, then within. Eritrea and Ethiopia, from allies to enemies. Eritrea broke away from Ethiopia in 1993 after decades of war. And instead of peace, both nations fought another war, 1998 to 2000, over dispute borders that claimed over 100,000 lives. To this day, relations remain tense, and Eritrea suffers under a dictatorship, extreme poverty, and continued military conflicts in the region. So separation did not bring prosperity or peace, only new struggles. How about Libya? From dictatorship to chaos. After Gaddafi's fall in 2011, Libya fractured into militia-controlled territories, with different groups fighting for oil and political power. And instead of democracy, it became a battlefield where warlords, terrorists, and foreign powers manipulate local conflicts for resources. Libya is now a failed state with consistent and constant violence and no stable government. That was Libya. Now let's look at Somalia. The endless cycle of division, they call it. Since the 1991 collapse of the central government, 1990, remember, is the bloodiest time for most countries. Somalia has been divided into clan-based territories, with warlords and extremist groups controlling different regions. Despite some regional autonomy, Somalia remains one of the most unstable and impoverished nations due to clan rivalries, lack of strong institutions, and foreign interference. So, Ethiopia's reality: fragmentation will only worsen conflicts, believe it or not. Ethiopia has more than 80 ethnic groups, many of which have historical grievances, land disputes, and resource struggles. If the country fragments, each new region or state will inherit the same problems that caused Ethiopia conflicts in the first place. Border disputes between ethnic groups, militias fighting for power and resources, foreign interventions exploiting divisions for economic and political gain. Instead of peace, Ethiopia could end up like Sudan, Libya, or Somalia, trapped in endless war. There will be no chance to stop it. So the only path forward in correcting narratives. There's also dialogue, also unity, like it or not. You live together, next to each other. Ethiopia must reject false ethnic narratives that fuel hatred and division. Historical grievances must be addressed through truth-seeking, not war. Resource-sharing agreements must be developed to prevent conflicts over land, water, and minerals. A strong, inclusive national identity must be built, where ethnicity is not used as a tool for political power. Dialogue, justice, and reconciliation are very important, not fragmentation. These are the only ways to achieve lasting peace. History proves that division never guarantees peace. It often leads to more violence, instability, and suffering. We showed that. Ethiopia must learn from these global examples and choose unity through truth, dialogue, and a just system of governance. Fragmentation will not solve Ethiopia's problems. Correcting historical falsehood, ensuring justice, and promoting national unity is the only sustainable path forward. And thank you. And I have also an option of a system of governance, a technocratic system of governance, where leaders are elected meritocratically based on their profession, doing specific tasks. We also can show historical case studies. Thank you very much. Hello, welcome back. In this section, we would like to, by the way, my name is Abebe Nagash. We would like to guide you from the failure of fragmentation to the necessity of a new system that prevents division, ensures competency, and prioritize national unity over ethnicity. So we need to expand the argument from failure to solution, right? So first we must ask why traditional democracy has failed in Ethiopia. It did. It failed. Didn't work. Never worked. Ethiopia's ethnic federalism has weaponized democracy instead of electing capable leaders. People vote along ethnic lines, deepening division. I know when you think what we're saying right now, you might say, weaponized democracy? Bear with me. Hold on. Many so-called leaders are not chosen based on competence, integrity, or vision, but rather tribal affiliation. Is that not true? And foreign-backed political agendas. Is that not true? The result is corrupt, inefficient governance that fails to deliver security, economic growth, or justice, name it. So Ethiopia, democracy failed in Ethiopia, and democracy failed Ethiopia. If Ethiopia continues this path, even without fragmentation, it will remain paralyzed by ethnic politics, instability, and weak leadership. So we need to have a new system of governance. That's the solution. We want to see the need of a meritocratic system of leadership. Meritocracy, this is because meritocracy ensures that leaders are chosen based on ability, knowledge, experience, and moral integrity, not ethnicity or political manipulation. Instead of politicians using ethnic rhetoric to gain power, leaders should be evaluated on performance, policies, and real results. This system is not about favoring one group over another, but rather breaking free from the ethnic federalist trap that has kept Ethiopia weak. A merit-based governance, remember, merit-based governance system would mean no ethnic-based elections, no political parties formed along ethnic lines, leaders proving their competence through qualifications, governance experience, and problem-solving abilities. So the role of a technocratic modular governance system will be Ethiopia's vast and diverse, but diversity should not mean a division. So Ethiopia is vast, we know that, and it's diverse, but diversity should not mean division. A technocratic modular governance system would allow regions to govern themselves locally. Is that not what you want? While ensuring a strong central authority that maintains national unity. This model would empower local governance to handle community-specific issues. So no central government will send cadres or anyone to administer local governance. So locals will handle their community-specific issues. This will prevent ethnic-based separatism by focusing on economic and administrative efficiency rather than tribal loyalty. Ensure national unity through a strong central government that upholds law, security, and national interests. The global success of technocracy and meritocracy can be shown as follows. Nations like Singapore, China, and Germany have used elements of meritocratic leadership and technocratic governance to rise from instability to prosperity. Ethiopia must break free from the failing ethnic-based political model and embrace governance based on capability, justice, and national unity. So, in conclusion, the path Ethiopia must take, Ethiopia cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of failed fragmented states or continue with a broken ethnic-based democracy. The only way forward is a meritocratic system where leaders are chosen for their competence, not tribal identity. A technocratic modular governance system that balances local autonomy with national unity. A strong central government that enforces laws and protects national interests while allowing local communities to thrive. A rejection of ethnic-based narratives and focus on truth, justice, and national cohesion. This is very, very important. In all of this, Ethiopians must reject ethnic-based narratives and focus on truth, justice, and national cohesion. So this is a choice between chaos and order. It can descend into chaos like Yugoslavia, Sudan, or Libya, or it can choose a structured, intelligent governance system that prioritizes national strength, stability, and unity. So, as EHP, Ethiopian Hearts for Peace, we have a bigger obligation to convince Ethiopians that the future is not in division, but in just, unified, and competent system of governance. Thank you. Now let's sit back and critique what we just suggested. And we have few improvements as well, and potential challenges. So we need to address the fear of elitism in a meritocracy. A common pushback to meritocratic leadership is that it might favor elites, highly educated individuals from privileged backgrounds, while ignoring the common people. Solution to this is to ensure inclusivity. A true meritocratic system must allow qualified individuals from all backgrounds, including rural and working class Ethiopians, to rise based on competence, not status. We should emphasize meritocracy. Elitism. It simply means competence, integrity, and vision over ethnicity and corruption. Number two, one risk of the technocratic modular governance system is that local autonomy could still fuel separatism if not properly structured. True, but the solution is a strong central government must ensure that local governance does not become a gateway for ethnic secession. So the central government should set national laws that apply equally to all regions, oversee security, foreign policy, and economic integration. Also prevent local governments from adopting ethnic-based policies. That would be the central government's role. The other is overcoming resistance from political elites and foreign interests. The current ruling elites, ethnic politicians, and foreign powers benefit from Ethiopia's instability. They will resist this shift. So the solution is a grassroots movement that educates and mobilizes people towards a new system is essential. Key message here to focus on is ethnic politics has made Ethiopia weaker, not stronger. We see it now. A competence-based government is the only way to end instability. Foreign powers support ethnic division because weak, divided Ethiopia is easier to control. The fourth is, how do we go from today's system to the proposed system? Making this transition, is it feasible? Wait a minute. Yeah. Solution is, there are strategic steps to transition. We can work on this in detail, and we already know those. But right now, public awareness campaigns, using my voice right now, is a path in transitioning to that. And we will be proposing proposals that outline the system in political terms, and we also form alliances with non-ethnic political and civic groups. The other one is international advocacy to expose how ethnic federalism fuels conflict. Final thought. We need to work together. Once fragmentation occurs, it's a chaos. Thank you very much. Sorry, I need to add this about TPLF. The TPLF's struggle and the narrative they built were heavily influenced by global ideological currents, particularly Marxist-Leninist principles that emphasized ethnic-based governance. The Soviet Union and Yugoslavia institutionalized ethnic federalism, now we spoke of it, which ultimately contributed to their fragmentation. Is that not true? Well, it's true. That's what we see now. Ethiopia, under the TPLF-led EPRDF, adopted a similar model, which has created enduring divisions and conflicts. Where did the TPLF go wrong? In creating false narratives? Where? 1. Ethnic victimhood and exceptionalism. TPLF framed Tigray as unique, oppressed, fostering a sense of perpetual victimhood that justifies extreme measures, including war and central control. And number 2, historical distortion. They presented Ethiopian history as an Amhara-dominated empire, suppressing others, ignoring Tigray's own deep role in shaping Ethiopia's governance. Number 3, ethnic federalism as a solution. They sold ethnic federalism as a means of equality, but it institutionalized division, made ethnic identity the basis for politics, and fueled cyclical violence. 4. Militarization as a necessity. TPLF promoted the idea that Tigray could only survive through military strength, leading to perpetual conflicts other than diplomatic solutions. 5. Number 5, false economic promises. They claimed ethnic federalism would create economic self-sufficiency. Yet, Tigray, like other regions, become heavily dependent on the federal system and external aid. So that's where they got things wrong. That's where TPLF got this wrong. Now, we would like to tell TPLF and those people who believe them, still believe them, why secession will not bring Tigray any good. Historical and global examples have been mentioned, and we can see them again. Just next to Tigray is Eritrea. After separating from Ethiopia in 1993, Eritrea faces economic struggles as well, political repression and isolation. And instead of stability and prosperity, it became one of the world's most closed of nations. Good or bad? Number 2, South Sudan. Seceded from Sudan in 2011. But instead of peace, internal power struggles led to brutal civil wars and massive displacement. Number 3, famous Yugoslavia's breakup. Ethnic-based fragmentation led to devastation wars, economic decline, and decades of instability. We also have seen the details before. Number 4, Soviet Union ethnic republics. Many former Soviet states like Ukraine and Georgia faced internal conflicts, economic downturns, and territorial disputes after independence. 5, Catalonia, Spain, and Quebec, Canada. Attempts at secession were met with economic uncertainty, division within their own populations, and stronger central government pushback. So you may ask, what's the better path for Tigray and Ethiopia? We say EHP, Ethiopian Hearts for Peace, say instead of pursuing secession, the Tigray people should push for national reconciliation. That is to say, acknowledging past mistakes and engaging in inclusive dialogue. Honest, inclusive dialogue. And the other one is meritocratic governance. We suggest this because we want professionals to lead us. You want Tigrayans need those kind of people to moving away from ethnic-based politics to competence-based leadership. And there should be also regional economic cooperation, strengthening trade and development within Ethiopia instead of isolation. Right now, Tigray is not trading with any neighboring Ethiopian region, isolated, really. Historical truth telling, correcting false narratives, and accepting shared responsibility for Ethiopia's past should be what we are advocating for. If TPLF and its supporters continue down the path of false narratives and secession, they risk making Tigray another Eritrea, isolated, struggling, and locked in endless conflict. So the TPLF, OLF, and ELF all emerged around the same time, we know that. Now we discussed TPLF. All of them influenced by similar ideological trends. Remember, the time of their rise was Marxist-Leninist doctrines, anti-centralist nationalism, and foreign backers promoting ethnic-based liberation struggles. Their narratives not only justified their armed struggles, but also shaped Ethiopia's current divisions. So, how TPLF, OLF, and ELF created false narrative? All three of them. 1. Ethnic oppression myth. It's a myth. Each group framed their ethnic group as uniquely oppressed, portraying historical grievance in exaggerated terms to justify armed struggle. Mostly Amharas and Orthodox Christians are claimed to be oppressors. TPLF claimed Tigray was marginalized by Amhara elites, ignoring Tigray's deep role in Ethiopian state building. OLF branded the entire Ethiopian state as a colonial entity, despite the Oromo people being key players in governance for centuries. ELF pushed the idea that Eritrea was forcibly annexed, disregarding its historical ties to Ethiopia. Because ELF says Ethiopia is only 100 years old, it doesn't make Ethiopia 100 years old. That's a false narrative. Ethiopia have the longest history in the world. Undeniable. Correcting this is very important. 2. Demonizing Ethiopian unity. Instead of advocating for reform, they equated Ethiopian nationalism with Amhara dominance, making any unity a threat rather than a shared aspiration. Why? 3. The ethnic federalism experiment. TPLF institutionalized ethnic federalism, fueling ethnic divisions instead of solving them. OLF and other Oromo nationalists pushed for Oromo dominance rather than coexistence. Mistake. ELF's ideology contributed to Eritrea's secession, setting a precedent for Ethiopia's fragmentation. Number 4. Weaponizing identity for power. These groups used ethnicity not just as an identity but as a political weapon, creating a cycle of exclusion and violence. Number 5 is militarization as a strategy. TPLF used its military dominance to control Ethiopia for nearly 30 years. OLF splintered into armed factions like Ola that continue terrorizing civilians today. Amharas and Orthodoxes and non-Oromos greatly suffered, amounting to genocide, crimes, war crimes against humanity. And still happening by the government as well as a terrorist. Complex, huh? But it's true now. It is happening now. ELF's war against Ethiopia contributed to Eritrea's long-term instability under dictatorship. Debatable to call dictatorship, but it is that. Why their secessionist and ethnic politics failed? Let's take a look at global and local examples. 1. Eritrea, ELF's legacy. Become independent but turned into one of the most repressive states with economic stagnation. And mass exodus. South Sudan is the second one. Ethnic independence gone wrong. Ethnic militias turned against each other after secession, leading to endless war. Number 3, Yugoslavia's ethnic-based breakup led to devastating wars, economic collapse, and long-term instability. We talked about this. TPLF's own failures in 2020 to 2022. The war is provoked against the Ethiopian state proved that militarized ethnic politics only leads to destruction. Number 5, Oromo nationalist chaos, OLF aligned forces destabilized Oromia, making governance impossible even under an Oromo-led federal government. Here is a path forward for Ethiopia. Instead of ethnic secession and division, Ethiopia needs meritocratic governance, which is a competence-based leadership instead of ethnic loyalty. There has to be historical truth and reconciliation. This is to say, recognizing shared histories, not false ethnic victimhood. Economic cooperation. Prosperity comes from integration, not fragmentation. Also, a strong but fair state needs to be there. Ethiopia needs a system that prevents militant ethnic factions from hijacking governance. The lasting damage of false narratives can be explained in many ways, and it's already in plain view. TPLF, OLF, and ELF narratives led to bloodshed, economic hardship, and deep mistrust. Even after ELF achieved Eritrean independence and TPLF dominated Ethiopia for decades, their people still suffer, proving that ethnic-based politics leads nowhere. The solution is unity through justice and truth, not fragmentation. So there is catastrophic consequences if TPLF, OLF, and ELF succeeded. If the goal of these three groups, ethnic-based rule, secession, or dominance, are realized, Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa would face irreversible disaster. One is ethnic war on a larger scale. If TPLF achieves its vision of Tigray as a powerful separate entity, it will constantly clash with Amhara, Afar, and even Eritrea over borders and resources. If OLF's dream of an expanded Oromia under its control happens, it will trigger more resistance from non-Oromo communities in Oromia, like the Amhara, Gurage, and Somali. If other ethnic factions follow suit, Ethiopia will become a battleground of rival ethnic militias, worse than the Balkans or Rwanda. Number 2, Ethiopia becomes an African Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia broke apart due to ethnic nationalism, leading to genocide, mass displacement, and years of war. If TPLF, OLF, and other ethno-nationalists succeed, Ethiopia will fracture into warring state, creating a lawless zones where warlords rule. 3, economic collapse and humanitarian disaster. If Ethiopia disintegrates, trade routes will be disrupted, famine will follow, and millions will be displaced. Eritrea, after secession, suffered extreme poverty and dictatorship. Ethiopia would face an even worse fate with multiple warring ethnic mini-states. Number 4, foreign interference and exploitation is a big one. Ethiopia's collapse would invite foreign intervention from the US, China, Turkey, the Gulf states, and Egypt, all using ethnic factions as proxies. Ethiopia's rich resources, gold, fertile land, and water would be taken by force, as no single ethnic region could defend itself alone. 5. No peace, even after secession. Eritrea's struggle after independence proves that secession does not guarantee stability. A free Tigray or Oromia would still suffer internal divisions, corruption, and economic ruin. Ethiopia's neighbors, Sudan, Somalia, and South Sudan, are already unstable. Ethiopia's collapse would turn the entire region into a disaster zone. So we have a better alternative: rejecting the path of destruction. Unify Ethiopia with justice and accountability for all ethnic groups. Merit-based governance instead of tribal loyalty. Economic cooperation, trade, and shared development over ethnic division. Historical truth-telling, correcting false narratives instead of rewriting history for political gain. So we have a final warning. Ethnic extremism leads to death, not liberation. TPLF, OLF, and similar groups promise freedom, but their methods only bring war. Secession is not a solution. It is the beginning of endless new conflicts. The only way forward is unity, based on truth, fairness, and the national identity over ethnic divisions. I hope this paints a clear picture of the danger Ethiopia faces today if these forces win. Thank you.